24th of April. Such were the continuing problems experienced in the region. During the first days of April, nocturnal armed meetings were also reported in villages just south of Blackburn. On the Easter Tuesday market day, universal shouting, hooting and hissing greeted the Huddersfield yeomanry wherever it appeared. Low-level demonstrations of this nature obscured a deeper belligerence. The commander of the Army's Northern District, Major General John Byng, predicted on the 9th of April that the least excitement in the West Riding Textiles District would cause an insurrection. They were his words. Meanwhile, Glasgow radicals had got it into their heads that there was to be a second, and this time a proper, English rising in a few days' time. Soon, Huddersfield magistrates were predicting that there would be a rising in Lancashire on Tuesday, 11th of April, with the Yorkshire town of Huddersfield the target the following day of concerted marches from Dewsbury, Halifax, Bradford, Wakefield and Barnsley. Magistrates in Manchester, however, had a different and perhaps more plausible scenario. Quote, from so many quarters and so corroborative. Simultaneous Yorkshire and Lancashire commotions were planned, they thought, around Blackburn, Burnley and Huddersfield on the 12th of April, explicitly to draw troops out of Manchester. Then, quote, if they can remain in any strength during the day, this will be communicated to the radicals of Manchester and its neighbourhood, and the blow is to be struck here. Simultaneously, I should say, a demonstration by the unemployed was going to tie down troops in Leeds. Now, this ambitious plan came to nothing. Manchester's stipendiary magistrates ascribed the town's deliverance to a combination of poor communication, effective preparation on their part, but of course they would, wouldn't they, and the corrosive impact on radical morale of the news of the failure of the Scottish Rising. Home Office correspondence is littered with information about intended disturbances, some well-meaning, but much of it probably anonymous hoaxing. However, corroboration that the rumours of a rising on the 12th of April did have solid foundation was all too apparent in the second occurrence in the vicinity of Huddersfield, the Grange Moor Rising, on the night of Tuesday the 11th. This was to be the rendezvous of rebels from Barnsley and from the Spen, Colne and Calder valleys. Having rested, the combined forces would march on Huddersfield. So confident were the members of the Barnsley contingent of success that they made no secret of their departure, which was accompanied by, quote, a great drum which they beat as they went. This also served to summon further supporters on the 12-mile march. Perhaps 500 strong, the marchers were relatively well equipped with 10-foot spikes, a variety of firearms, provisions, blankets and banners. Hunt, the intrepid champion of the rights and liberties of the people, said one of those banners. Another, he that smiteth a man so that he die shall be surely put to death, said a second. And that must surely, I think, be some reference back to executions arising from Luddism. The centre of Huddersfield, meanwhile, presented an extraordinary sight. Each of the streets leading onto the marketplace was barricaded with carts and wagons. Infantry arrived to reinforce the town's volunteer riflemen. Cavalry and horse artillery were drafted in from Wakefield, and the Northern Command of the Army temporarily relocated its headquarters into a hotel in Huddersfield. All northern garrisons were placed on a high alert. You cannot be too silent on this letter, Byng wrote with his instructions to the colonel commanding the Leeds garrison. In all your preparations, make no show, create no suspicion or alarm. Only the Barnsley contingent, however, ever arrived on Grange Moor. It dispersed rapidly when a detachment of dragoons and yeomanry was sighted cantering to the moor from Huddersfield. 15 were arrested within minutes. Barnsley magistrates issued warrants for 71 more, though only 20 prisoners were finally committed for trial for high treason. Note how the stakes have been raised since Luddism. Nobody's now being tried for murder, and nobody's being tried for conspiracy. It's high treason. On the Wednesday afternoon, a small crowd gathered on Beacon Hill near Halifax beneath a flag and with musical accompaniment. Pistols were fired into the air. A skyrocket was sent up and a bundle of straw was set ablaze. This was probably a bravura display of defiance, a bit like stopping the mail coach, perhaps, rather than a serious insurrectionary move. Over the next 2 days, however, meetings on the mosses outside Manchester and Salford waited for news. Key delegates loitered on Manchester's main streets, quote, all in anxious expectation of news from Huddersfield, inquiring of every coach whither from Yorkshire or the north. Finally, an observer who'd been sent over the border to Huddersfield, quote, arrived and made known the melancholy result. The members of the committee cursed and swore. Delegates from Manchester's satellite towns all hastened to their respective places to communicate the unpleasant tidings, unquote. After Grangemore, the Home Office was able to assemble evidence of national delegate movements in the days preceding it. Representatives from Blackburn, Bolton, Manchester, Stalybridge and Stockport had met on Saturday 8th of April to digest the news that Nottingham, quote, refused to take any lead in the rising and that Hull and Birmingham had never received details of what was being planned. Carlisle, at least, was placarded over the weekend with notices from Glasgow censoring the apathy of their brethren in the south, and arms drilling and training certainly took place on Coalfell Hill, 7 miles northeast of Carlisle. At Sheffield, an intended attack on the barracks to seize arms was postponed only as 200 demonstrators were within a few hundred yards of the gates. In Lancashire, low-level violence continued for several days, with rumours of a rising particularly centred on Blackburn. On the 17th, drilling was reported on Black Moss, 8 miles from Blackburn, and 2 pikes were found when a house in Mellor, a community north of Blackburn, was searched. On the same day, a systematic house-to-house search in Ashton-under-Lyne discovered pikes in the homes of several radical weavers. Simultaneously, attempts at fomenting a general strike were reported in Leeds, Manchester, Oldham and Stockport. Then there was talk of another rising to be attempted on the 23rd of April and again on the 7th of May, but talk was all it was. The 1820 insurgency was over. Quote, we are so much discouraged at our brethren not coming forward in a more tumultuous form that we are at a loss which way to pursue, the Glasgow Central Radical Committee wrote to Manchester on 18th April. It was useless for us to persevere unless England would have stepped forward with a helping hand. We are compelled to submit on account of the military, who seem to have an unlicensed authority to do anything they may think proper. Until we hear from you, until something is further executed on your part, we shall remain dormant. We remain, though, yours in bonds of union and liberty. Now, in his history of the French Revolution, Thomas Carlyle captured with typical acuity the quandaries that threaten to consume any insurgency. So often, if you really want to understand what is happening among insurgent elements in England and Britain, you have to turn to one of its most reactionary writers, Carlyle. Reader, fancy not in thy languid way that insurrection is easy. Insurrection is difficult. Each individual uncertain even of his next neighbour, totally uncertain of his distant neighbours. What strength is with him? What strength is against him? Certain. Only that, in the case of failure, his individual portion is the gallows. Uncertainty of neighbours, both close and distant, was all too apparent in 1820. The disturbances that spring, though, were deeply rooted in their local communities. Though the mindset of Britain's would-be insurgents was moulded by their acquaintance with the arguments of Carlyle, Cobbett or Hunt, it required a distinctive combination of local factors to catalyse real commitment. Scarcity and want were not enough, nor was anger at the exploitative nature of wage labour. Had they been, more men like the Burnley weaver William Varley would have taken up arms. On the 7th of April, Varley wrote in his diary, "The country is all on uproar. Some say that Huddersfield Castle is pulled down. There is great disturbance in Scotland and Spain. And well there may be, because there is no trade to be had. The poor man may now go to despair